Hi, everybody. This is Keith Meyer with SkyView Advisors. I'm the Director of Manufactured Housing. Rent control has become a hot topic in the majority of conversations I'm having right now with both property owners and buyer groups. The reality is rent control activity is expanding again, and it's already changing property values, development activity, and ultimately ownership outcomes. Right now, we're seeing a rapidly evolving legislative landscape. In Pennsylvania, the governor there just introduced state-mandated rent control. California has two active bills going through the legislature, one for rent control, one for right of first refusal at the state level. State of Oregon recently clamped down on their rent control measures from a maximum of 10% to a maximum of 6% rent increases for the majority of communities. And the state of Washington, the State Owners Association actually sued the state government for oversteps as far as their property rights. So from a market perspective, the immediate impact is showing up in valuations. Uncertainty creates pricing pressure for both equity partners and for lenders. You can really see this playing out on the ground in places like New Mexico, where I'm personally involved with community ownership. There's been recently introduced legislation which does not have a basis in today's operational reality, and as written is not prescriptive enough to follow. In some cases, it creates situations that can be interpreted as an illegal taking of property owners' rights. Owners are often underrepresented in this process, which is why many owners in the state are now hiring lobbyists to help push for a seat at the table for reasonable compromises. If you look at the neighbor to the north, Colorado, with a few years of hindsight, you start to see some unintended consequences: reduced investment and reduced affordable housing supply. And the supply side is where this really compounds. Developers need pricing flexibility to offset rising taxes, insurance, and construction costs. When rent caps are introduced, it becomes much harder to get construction financing approved, which ultimately reduces new supply. You can see the contrast clearly in a state like Texas, where there's virtually no rent control. They continue to see strong development activity and naturally lowering rents, especially in cities like Austin and Dallas, which have built many units over the past couple years. Another example is Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota, which are adjacent but have very different housing policies, with St. Paul struggling to provide new housing supply due to oversteps on restrictions. Regarding the right of first refusal part of the equation, it's a more nuanced story. There are success cases, typically where you have organized, well-capitalized groups involved with a long-term understanding of the business. But there are also failures starting to surface. In Colorado, for example, we've seen undercapitalized resident ownership groups struggle with management transitions, leading to distressed assets returning to the market only a few years later. And ultimately, that's not an outcome that anybody wants. So when you step back and look at the full picture, rent control combined with right of first refusal almost always leads to lower valuations, reduced reinvestment into communities, and mixed outcomes for residents. And in many cases, the long-term effect ends up being the opposite of the intended goal of improving access to affordable housing. Policy is moving fast across the majority of U.S. states, but from what we're seeing, the market is adjusting to these changes even faster.